The city council recently took steps with hopes of doing some crime fighting in town. One of those things was bringing in a consulting firm to help OPD, and that consulting firm includes Bill Bratton and Bob Wasserman. Do you think it's a good move or bad move to do that?
I mean, to my mind, the contracts have kind of neither been here nor there. The City of Oakland and the Oakland Police Department have brought in a series of contractors over the past few years, upwards of $1 million spent on contractors and consultants just last year alone. And I think we haven't seen any substantive change in how policing is happening in the City of Oakland, in police-community relationships, in any kind of decrease in the number of civil complaints that are being brought or lawsuits that are being paid out by the City of Oakland. So it doesn't strike me that more and more and more consultants is actually having any kind of impact on how policing happens. And they're doing this before they even hire the compliance director for the federal consent decree. So it seems to me that it's maybe a cart before the horse, that they really have to figure out how to get their house in order, and consultants don't seem to be having an impact on that.
The point I want to add is the last monitor's report for the last quarter concludes that the Oakland Police Department is actually regressing in terms of meeting the terms and conditions of the compliance agreement, that they are less compliant rather than improving in compliance. And so that's a very ominous sign, and I'm not sure that just hiring experts is going to help the situation if the Oakland Police Department itself is not willing to take the necessary recommendations and implement them.
We've heard a lot of talk about Bill Bratton and the stop and frisk policy that took place when he was commissioner in New York City. Is there a legitimate reason to worry about that?
Absolutely. The experience in New York shows that Bill Bratton's stop and frisk is not the reason why crime has been reduced. That crime was going down before Bill Bratton took over. And the most recent article from the New York Times shows that since, I think, June, stop and frisk has gone down 28% and crime is still going down. So the conclusion that the folks in New York, the ACLU, have made is that the only thing they were using stop and frisk for was to harass innocent people, because they were not finding guns and they were not arresting criminals as a result of stop and frisk, but it was used to basically terrorize a certain sector of the community and used to harass young men of color. So that's what's there to be concerned about. And with the history and practices of the Oakland Police Department of not being in compliance with standards and acceptable behavior, that would really make me concerned.
I mean, I think the other thing with Bill Bratton is that stop and frisk is one issue, but it's only really one issue in his style of policing. Zero tolerance, quality of life suppression policing. It gets called lots of different things. And stop and frisk is kind of the most heightened right now because of the lawsuit that the ACLU is bringing in New York City. But I think what we have also seen is the use of gang injunctions, which Oaklanders have summarily rejected in this city. The use of curfews, which Oaklanders have summarily rejected. The use of anti-loitering ordinances, which Oaklanders have summarily rejected. All of these things are part and parcel of how he does his brand of policing and what he sells to cities. And I think, we need to be mindful of all of those things creeping into the City of Oakland. As Yolanda pointed out, the City of Oakland has a police department that cannot be trusted to mind itself, to act in a way that doesn't violate the very basic rights of the residents of this city, and giving them additional tools that encourage them to go after certain communities, to aggressively police, to aggressively ticket, to sweep away and make invisible entire segments of our communities, is something I think we should be very, very concerned about.
Well, it sounds like to me that you're talking about an atmosphere of racial profiling. Mm-hmm. The overall thing. Is this another legitimate concern? Should be with Oakland residents?
Absolutely. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would say that many of I was one of the co-counsel opposing the Fruitvale gang injunction. And I would say that my clients, and from talking to kids on the street, that as a regular practice, OPD would stop and frisk boys, starting from the time they were 10. Just take them up, put them against a car, frisk them on their way home from school, and this is something that they are familiar with. So for them, the reason why they don't see OPD as their friend or as someone they want to call or someone they want to have assist them is because of this regular harassment that they've been subjected to from the time that they were tiny. A 10-year-old is a 5th grader, and that's when it begins. And this is part of their regular life. They know when they come home from school, they know what the route they're walking, and this is what they have come to expect from OPD. So if that's already happening, to encourage it to happen more is going to lead to the kind of numbers we had in New York, where hundreds of thousands of stops happen, in which I think the number of arrests was 0.02%. They weren't stopping criminals, they were stopping people who lived in the community as a means of oppression, and that's not acceptable.
And to your point, you know, it's highly racialized. So it's not random who gets stopped, whether that's, you know, the geographic focus of how they police or who they think is suspicious. You know, the subjectivity that goes along with this style of policing really hinges on a kind of racialized logic about who a criminal is, so-called, or who's meant to be doing harm in neighborhoods. And, you know, from people who live in neighborhoods of communities of color, we know that it's not as easy as making a profile like that.
The city council also did a few more things as far as for crime-fighting measures, bringing in sheriff's deputies on a part-time basis for up to 180 days, funding an additional police academy, and hiring 20 police service technicians. Okay. Do you think this is effective?
I don't know necessarily that these steps are going to be the most highly effective steps. The police academies, as we've seen, you know, turn out a certain number of people. They always ask for a police academy. That's very, very routine thing for the council to do. In terms of contracting with the sheriff's department, I think that's a somewhat slippery slope. We'll see what happens with that. I mean, Sheriff Ahern is the same guy who just earlier last year wanted to buy a drone to surveil the residents of this county. He's the same guy that bought a tank and drove it down down Broadway on May Day. That kind of militarized sense of the sheriff's department under his watch makes me wonder what kinds of practices would happen on the streets of Oakland if they're doing policing on a regular basis. And then in terms of the civilian contractors, you know, moving more cops onto the streets, again, I think it's a real core question about the culture of the police department, what the practices of the cops are. So putting more cops on the streets either amplifies the bad practices that are going on already, or they fix the culture of their practice. And I'm not sure that Oakland Police Department can be trusted to fix its own practice.
I think the effectiveness of the Oakland Police Department is a question that I would ask Oakland government officials to start examining. Are they effective? How are they policing? And what are they doing with their time? Simply asking for more and more and more when the basic institution is not effective and not able to deal with the tasks that they've been charged with, I think is throwing good money after bad. And I think that when you look at the rates in which they solve crime, when you analyze, I've seen many police reports where you say, why are they spending their time doing this? Why aren't they doing something that is serious? The amount of effort that they have put into trying to arrest and prosecute occupiers on piddling things like jaywalking, that's not a good use of police time. And I think that what I have felt is that there is a vindictiveness and a pettiness toward certain behaviors. For example, I had a client who was arrested for felony vandalism because he wrote in chalk on a wall that the OPD dress badly, oink oink, and it incensed them, and they arrested him for felony vandalism. And the charges didn't stick, but it meant he went to jail. It meant that there was a whole brouhaha. It took up a lot of money. They had to write a report, and the question is why. So I think before you say we want more, it's real important that Oakland look at how effective are its police and what are they doing with their time. I think that's a question that no one ever asks, and I think that that's a question that needs to be asked and needs to be answered.
And one more point on that, I mean, at the last full city council meeting, Mayor Kwan herself said that the city is spending 50% of its general fund on police-related expenditures. If the city is already making an investment of half of its resources into policing, I think it sends a very clear message to the city's residents of where their priorities lie. And if you follow Yolanda's logic or my logic around the kind of disruption between the trust of any sort in that police force and the complete abuse of that force of the residents, the city sends a very clear message of what it believes should be happening on its streets. So adding to that, I think, exacerbates rather than acts in good faith.
Okay, talk about the Oakland crime situation. I mean, there are people in this town who are really scared of what's going on. A lot of brazen crimes taking place. People are afraid to come to this town to shop, go to the restaurants or whatnot, afraid of something happening to them. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, what do you guys see here in Oakland? I mean, do you agree that, crime's kind of getting out of hand here?
I mean, crime had been going down in the city of Oakland for years and years. And I think there are real things that people genuinely feel afraid of. And I don't think that anybody disagrees with that. And I don't think anybody is flip about that. I think the distinction is what people think are useful solutions to addressing that. And from my perspective, suppressing people's ability to move in their neighborhoods, disrupting family lives, stigmatizing young people in schools, making trade-offs between people's health and well-being in the longer term, in the immediate and in the longer term, in favor of controlling and aggressively intimidating people, I think really is a very, very quick fix, and it might kind of put the lid on something temporarily, but if you only put the lid on, eventually the lid's going to come off. And I don't think that it's a thoughtful, strategic way of addressing the crime situation. So do I want people to harm each other? Absolutely not. Do I want people to be shooting at each other? Absolutely not. But I think when the people who are meant to be enforcing that act in that same way, when the aggressiveness of people confronted with the cops is at that level, when guns are drawn instantly, it's also hard for the city then to say, we want no aggression from our residents. So I think if we invest in the things that we know work and we've seen work, mediation and restorative justice and transformative justice principles, community centers that get to stay open after school hours so that young people have places to go, stable and affordable housing so people have shelter over their heads, a meaningful way to engage in the economy so that people aren't really scrapping in the same way to get by. You can do short-term things. It's not only that a long-term vision. You can take steps now. There are organizations in this city now that do those things, and also an investment in the longer term.
I would echo what Rachel has said. I think that if you keep spending all of your resources on suppression, you may get a short-term benefit, but at a tremendous cost. If it costs Oakland 50% now, they want more, then soon it's going to cost 60% or 75% of the total budget at neglecting many of the other needs. And as soon as you take the lid off of the suppression, the problem comes right back. So it's not an effective or sustainable way of approaching that problem. And I think one of the things that is really coming up is you have to look at data-driven results. What results really work? It's not just because someone says, I'm a police officer and this is my opinion. We know that that doesn't work. You have to really test it to see what works. And there's lots of information that's coming up now. Is it more police? Is it the fact that we had a crack cocaine epidemic? Is it the fact that we have environmental toxins in the air that contribute to problems that people have, such as lead or diesel pollution, or the kind of smuggling that comes in from the port? I mean, I think that there are many issues that happen in Oakland that no one looks at, and the only thing everyone as a knee-jerk reaction is more cops. But that never changes the underlying environment as to why these things happen. We have an economy that's been in a tailspin. And I had an argument with someone about the lack of, high school graduate jobs in Oakland. What kind of jobs can a high schooler get when they come out? And I would say that of all the clients I have, if you ask them what is the one thing they want, do they want to do crime? Do they want their children to do crime? They always say no. The one thing they want is a job that pays them enough to be able to support themselves and their family. And that's hard to find in Oakland. So I think that those are the things that people have been saying for a long time, but that hasn't been happening. And what we're doing now is spending all of this money on police who don't live in our communities, who take that money and spend it elsewhere. And so it's like this hole that we keep plugging, and it's just draining away from Oakland and making Oakland even poorer. And I think that that's what the problem is.
So, do you really have confidence in the city leadership that what this consulting firm comes up with, that the city leaders are going to do the right thing? Do you have confidence in our city leaders?
I don't have confidence in our city leaders at this point. I'm also not sure that it's up to the city leaders to change the city. So I generally speaking think that the residents over the past few weeks, especially around this controversy with William Bratton, really bound together and really spoke with a very united voice against it. And I think it's an opportunity for the residents of the city to talk to each other about what they want as much as it is to talk to the city leaders. So I feel like the city leaders really abdicated a lot of responsibility for guiding the city in a positive direction and gave over power to Chief Jordan, who they said, do what you like. And Larry Reed's been saying that for quite some time. It's like, you're understaffed, do anything you like. And while Gallo said, in front of me, next to some other reporter, said, injunctions, curfews, anything, right? And I don't trust that they're thinking in a strategic way with the best intention of all residents. I think they want to get reelected. I think that's their job. I think they're interested in the people who get enough resources into their campaigns to get them reelected. But I don't have a lot of confidence that they're looking out for flatlanders, that they're looking out for people who really need support coming home from jails and prisons, that they're looking out for young people who are experiencing school push-out. I don't have a lot of confidence in that. I feel like it is, like Yolanda said, a lot of kind of hole plugging without any kind of risk-taking that would allow us to make really substantial change. They keep saying they want bold and creative solutions, and they keep getting offered bold and creative solutions by the community, and then they choose to use really, really staid, old, tried, tested, and failed solutions like these additional consultants, like more aggressive policing.
On a certain level, I'm pretty simple-minded, and I think that if the city officials really wanted to solve the problem, one easy way of solving the problem is to give 10,000 jobs to young men between the ages of 16 and 25. And I know that as soon as I say that, people are going to say, well, we don't have the funding for that. So I'm going to put this out. I'm going to hope that you publish it. And that is, Alameda County is sitting on a budget surplus of $1.7 billion. At the same time that they're cutting welfare and they're cutting social services, and now we're talking about cutting Head Start. So all the things that help kids get ahead and produce a more productive life are being cut while we're hiring more police. And I would like the city of Oakland's leaders to go to Alameda County and say, give us the money to hire and create 10,000 jobs. Larry Reed's talking about dumping in the Deep East. Well, these guys could clean it up. We could plug all those potholes. We could beautify every medium strip. We could have a community garden in every empty lot. We could redo that library that Occupy Oakland wants to do, that free library. There are so many people with so many wonderful ideas that would improve Oakland. And if the money could be cut to do that, and we have the money in the county, then I think you would see a dramatic reduction in crime, because that's what people want. People just want to have something that allows them to live a regular life.
Do you think all these ideas that we're talking about, it sounds like to me it might take quite a bit of time to implement? Do you agree or not, or can we, get started and start curbing crime very soon?
I think we can start today. I mean, I think we are starting already, right? So that has the assumption that there's nothing going on. There's all kinds of really great stuff going on in Oakland already. And members of Stop the Injunctions Coalition, like the East Side Arts Alliance, like Homies Empowerment Project, like Courage, like like Critical Resistance, like, all Fat Beats, all of these groups and organizations are doing really good work in the community already that's aimed at reducing the harm that people face and do to each other, at providing additional kinds of programming and support for people who are interested in kind of transforming those relationships, in doing art projects and keeping community centers open, all of that, and feeding people and providing them with green space. So that's going on now. And people are trying peacemaking things and mediation and intervening in situations of violence all day, every day. So that happens. What we need to see is a shift toward really supporting those. And some of that's money, but some of that's also the cops not clamping down on that. Some of that's also people getting elevated in terms of the profile of their work. And fair enough, also resources. So I think it's a matter of amplifying what's good and adding to it. I don't think we need to start from scratch, and I think that's what we keep saying to the city leaders over and over. And they also need a chance. So they're willing to give, William Bratton 6 months, 9 months to continue this contract with Wasserman indefinitely. Why can't they do that with the community organizations in their own city?
I think what I want to underline what Rachel has said is that much of what we're talking about is going on now. People are very committed to that, and they do as much as they can do with the resources that they have. And if it were flipped a little bit so that the emphasis of resources went to people trying to do some of these things, then you would find a completely different reality out there. So that instead of it being a struggle and trying to find the city person who can give you the permission to start a garden in an abandoned lot that's basically now a garbage dump. If it could be easier, then you would see a lot more of this happening. But it's happening every day. People are doing this out there. It's just not acknowledged, and it's not encouraged. So I think that to me is the alternative model. It is the same energy. It is the same energy as First Fridays. It is the same energy that has revitalized Uptown. People love Oakland. They're very committed to Oakland, and they're doing all kinds of things out there. But it's not noticed. So what we're saying is notice it and support that, rather than come down and always focus on oppression, suppression, jail, prisons. That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work, and we also know that we can't afford it.